At the age of 19, I felt called into the ministry. And in just a week after that, I was asked to preach my first sermon. About 3 months after that, I was offered to be pastor of a church. This was during the time I was a student at Trevecca Nazarene College. It's now university, Trevecca Nazarene University. And our daughter Melissa just received her master's degree from Trevecca. But when I was there, it was Trevecca Nazarene College. And I was given this church to be the pastor of, and it was about 115 miles from Nashville. We drove every Friday afternoon. When school was out to Palmer, I would sleep there Friday night, Saturday night, and sometimes Sunday night, come back Monday morning, or sometimes go back Sunday night. But I'll never forget it. It was on the 31st of October, 1955. For some reason, I stayed over on the Sunday night and got up early Monday morning to drive back to Nashville. Usually I would play the radio all the way to Nashville. But for some reason, a burden of prayer came on me. I won't go into all the details of that. My only reason for bringing up this story is to say this. As I drove, the glory of the Lord filled the car. I could take you to the place on US 41 on the way to Nashville from near Mont Eagle, Tennessee. And to my amazement, there before me is the person of Jesus. He's interceding for me at the right hand of God. He was more real to me than any of you are that I look at right now. He was literally that real. And for the next hour or so, I was in glory. But I don't remember all that was going on. When I get to heaven, I hope to get a DVD of that whole experience and then find out what was going on. Because from the moment that the Lord first appeared, it was an hour later that as I drove into Smyrna on the way to Nashville, there was Jesus again interceding for me. And I heard him say to the Father, "He wants it." The Father replied, "He can have it." And in that moment, it was like a liquid warmth just went into my chest. I mean, I could feel it in my chest. You could say it was physical. It was that real. But I entered into a rest unlike anything I'd ever had in my life. I didn't know you could have anything like that. And now the Lord was more real than ever. And on that day, I knew I was eternally saved. By sundown, I even saw that I had been chosen from the foundation of the world. And here I was coming into teaching that nobody had taught me. If anything, what I'd heard about it, it was of the devil. And now I knew that I was eternally saved. And I said some of this, I told some of these things to students at Trevecca. And they said, "Well, you know, you're going off into Calvinism." I said, "Well, what's that?" And my professor, Dr. William Greathouse, I was his assistant. He said, "R.T., you're going off into Calvinism." I said, "What is that?" He said, "Well, we don't believe that." I said, "Really? Well, then we are wrong. Because all I know is I've been chosen, and I know I cannot be lost no matter what I do." "Oh, R.T., don't ever say anything like that." I said, "I'm telling you, I am eternally saved." They said, "Well, you'll change your mind." They could not have known how deep it was, how real it was. And from that hour to this, I've never doubted it. Now, I will admit that I went for a while thinking maybe that this was exclusive to me, that I knew I was eternally saved, but not everybody would be eternally saved. Until I began to read the 4th chapter of Romans. And reading the 4th chapter of Romans taught me that every person who believes that Jesus died on the cross for their sins, who believes that Jesus was raised from the dead, is eternally saved, even if they don't have this kind of experience that I had. The experience that I relate to you is not a requirement to be saved or to know that you're saved. But I thought maybe because it happened to me, I was the only one that could know it. But what I've sought to do over the years is to show that everybody who transfers his or her trust that had been in their good works to what Jesus did for them on the cross is just as eternally saved as I was, because once saved, always saved. Now, although it's not essential to believe this, let me tell you how sad it is if you don't. And I don't mean to be unfair. Anybody who may be here today, you may feel put upon. I'm not here to convince you. But I'll tell you this story. My Aunt Ruth, who was the organist at my old church back in Ashland, told me a story about 8 or 9 years ago. Since we retired, went up to Ashland to see her. She had been very ill, and yet she seemed somewhat better. And she told this story, that she had a heart attack there in Ashland, was rushed to the hospital, and they said they had what they called code blue. I'd never heard of that before, but evidently it's a code that all the nurses, everybody on the floor know. When they get the code blue, they stop what they're doing. They all go to the same room, because my Aunt Ruth was now pronounced dead. And they go there to resuscitate her. And that's what they did. And so she told me about it. She said, "Do you know, R.T., I was in a place where I heard the most beautiful music I have ever heard." Her being an organist, God just gave her a taste. She said, "I never heard anything like it. It was so beautiful." Then the next thing I know, my eyes are open, I see the monitor of my heart, and they resuscitated and they brought me back. She said, "Why did they bring me back? Because now," she says, "I'm afraid that I won't make it." That teaching that had been drummed into her, that she had to be good enough to get to heaven, and she thought here she was in heaven, and now she's back on earth, and she's got to live, and she says, "What if I slip? What if I don't come up to the standard?" And I'm worried. I said, "Aunt Ruth, let me tell you, you are as saved as I am." But I went over the gospel again, and as if she needed it, and perhaps she did in a way, and explained the gospel. She prayed, and I said, "You don't need to worry. You are eternally saved." And she said, "Well, this is wonderful, because I sure want to go back to where I was." But isn't it sad? Isn't it sad that somebody would have that and then think, "Oh, I could still miss it"? Well, she died 6 months later, as it turns out, and she's in heaven today. It's a wonderful thing to know that when you're saved, you cannot be lost. I can remember those early days after it happened to me, the thrilling feeling it was, I'm not going to hell. I'm not going to hell.